Hey everybody, welcome back. I am Jim Johnson, the project manager and line editor for the Star Trek Adventures role-playing game and the Captain's Log solo role-playing game, both published by Modiphius Entertainment. Welcome back to my channel, Trekking and Writing Life, where I talk about all things Trek, all things writing, how they combine, how they diverge, and occasionally some other stuff in there too. So this video is a continuation of my series on what I'm calling From Screen to Table, where I take a Star Trek episode and I break it down into gameable components, how you might make some of the things that happen in the episode happen in your game conceptually, not the exact specific instances, but like how you can structure extended tasks, challenges, events, whatever that you've seen on screen, and you bring it to your table. So like if your players say, hey, remember when Spock and Kirk did that cool thing in that episode, how can we do that in our game? Hey, when Bashir and O'Brien did that cool thing in DS9, how can we do that in our game table, in our game space, that kind of thing. So it's not going to be a review of the episode. It's not specifically anyway. I'll have my commentary and my editorial comments on that, of course. But it's not really a review of the episode. It's really just going through the episode, taking out the elements of it that made it gameable, and then how you might apply some of that stuff to your game. I am not going to go into a lot of detail into specifically how things might work out, mostly because there are as many different ways to play Star Trek Adventures and Captain's Log as there are players, and how you and your group might approach the solution to a given problem might be entirely different from another one. This is all my opinion, my perspective. It's not that of Modiphius, it's not that of any of the other writers. They can do their own videos and their own discussions if they want to. This is just my perspective, my point of view here. So we are talking about the season finale of Season 2 of Discovery, Such Sweet Sorrows Part 2. I covered Part 1 in an earlier video, so go check that out if you haven't watched that yet. And then this one, we're going to talk all about Part 2, how this turned out to be a season finale. In a lot of ways, it turned out to be a series finale, almost a series reboot, although I guess you would call Season 3, Episode 1 the reboot, but this is really kind of like ending a significant chapter of Discovery, not so much just the end of a season, but I mean like really ending the chapter of them in the Prime universe and going into a completely bold new direction in Season 3. So there's a lot to cover here. I will try to bounce through it sequentially, but I might bounce it back and forth a bit. Might be a little disjointed. I just beg your indulgence. Also a warning, this is a spoiler warning. If you haven't seen the show yet, if you haven't seen this episode yet, there's going to be spoilers galore in here. So if you don't want spoilers, or if you intend to watch the show at some point and you don't want to be surprised, then you should probably turn this off, go watch it, and then come on back and let's talk about it. All right, anyway, so where in the previous episode, the first of the two-parter, was really super role-playing heavy, right? There was a lot of goodbyes, there's a lot of scenes between characters talking and interacting and like pulling on all those character plot threads and strings that they've been building over the last two seasons. There were certainly opportunities for dice rolling and some tasks and some difficulty 0 and 1 tasks and stuff, but it really first part of this two-parter was really build up to what's coming. There were some significant things happening, absolutely, especially with the character interactions, but in terms of like actually dropping dice on the table and getting stuff done, it wasn't quite so heavy. And I think as a game master, I might have front-loaded the two-parter with RP stuff, knowing that the second half was going to be, dice rolling galore. And in fact, this episode, like if you break it down into all the different beats that are happening and all the different things that the characters are accomplishing, there's a lot of dice rolling in this episode. So I think, when I was joking in the last video about how some of the players who really liked to roll dice we're not getting the love last time. Now they're getting an abundance of it, right? So, and we'll kind of talk through this a little bit, generally speaking. Again, I'm not going to dictate which one must be a challenge, which one must be a an extended task or something. And I'm speaking specifically of Star Trek Adventures here. You can absolutely use this video and the insights and drop it into any Star Trek game that you're running, whether it's Last Unicorn Games, Decipher, FASA, something else, Homebrew, whatever. I think a lot of this stuff is universal. I've been playing and game mastering Star Trek RPG for 30 blah 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 years, and I've played all the major ones, and I like Star Trek Adventures the best, and that makes me sound like a homer. I can guarantee it, I'm sure, because I'm working on it and I'm in charge of it. But I think Star Trek Adventures is the one that I wish I had 20 years ago, when my group and I were trying to find a really good narrative crunch, medium light game that we could just really get into and make it feel like a Star Trek episode, adventure after adventure at our game table. Our homebrews were in a lot of ways similar to Star Trek Adventures, but just not with the same level of detail or nuance that Nathan Dowdell was able to build into it. Anyway, all that being said, we can talk about that at a future date. Let's talk about episode 2, Such Sweet Sorrows, part 2. So a lot of stuff going on in this episode, right? First half had a lot of RP stuff going on, a lot of things happening. Things are moving, things are setting up to having this big fight with the Control, the AI, Leland, and then the Enterprise and Discovery helping each other out, so that Burnham can get the suit built, the time suit built, and then get her off into the future, so that she can take Discovery with her and protect the sphere data from Control taking it and then completely wreaking havoc on the galaxy. So these are galactic scale stakes, which you can certainly do in your game, but there is a risk that you might do so much that where do you go from there, right? I think in some ways that might be kind of what Discovery dealt with, is like, if every season you're saving the galaxy, like, where do you go from there, right? There's only so much more you can do once you've saved the galaxy umpteen times. So anyway, one of the many extended tasks that are happening here, or you could call this a gated challenge, depending on how you pursue it, is just building the time suit in the first place, right? There's a whole bunch of people helping to build the time suit, to build the components, to test the components, to adjust them, to make sure that they all fit. And you could call this an extended task, although I don't know that I would probably call this a gated challenge, if only because like the concept of a breakthrough, like they're not making some great incredible discovery as they're building in the suit. They're just building in the suit. They have to get it done. They have to do step A, step B, step C through the procedure to build the thing, assemble it, and have it done. That feels more like either a linear challenge or a gated challenge to me, and so that's where I would probably be doing with it. So here's an example. Here's one of the pieces of the suit that they have to build, and then meanwhile, while that's happening, Reno and company are charging the time crystal, right? So that might have been, honestly, at this point, now that Queen Poe built the thing to charge the crystal, and then Reno's in charge of doing it, I didn't get the sense in that scene that she was really doing anything other than waiting for it to finish charging, right? So I'm not confident I would have even made that a task. Maybe like a low-level task just to kind of like monitor the power systems or power distribution or something. It gave her something to do. It gave this character something to do. But again, I like watching the episode a handful of times now. I'm not confident that she did anything directly to influence the completion of this piece of it, right? So this might have just been a matter where this was maybe an early task that was part of the overall gated challenge, where Queen Poe and Reno had to work together to get the thing working in the first place, get the crystal plugged in, and that might have been an early part of the gated challenge to complete the time suit, to say that one of the things that had to happen in that gated challenge was for the crystal to be charged up, and we'll see that later once they hand off the crystal to Burnham, right? That finishes the challenge. She installs it into the time suit. Time suit's charged up, ready to go. So in this case, Reno's just kind of like shepherding that bit of it along, but that's happening in parallel with the suit being built, right? So that's probably how I'd handle that. Meanwhile, the Control ships show up, and the Enterprise is fighting. The Discovery's fighting. They're getting ready to get into the weeds, or into the furball here, basically. So there's some explosions and there's some flying bits, as is standard for the course on Starfleet vessels. Someone should really look into that. But anyway, so there's no real thing here other than they're just doing their space combat thingy, and space combat in and of itself in Star Trek Adventures is an extended task, right? So there's just things to accomplish there. Different crew members on the bridges of the Enterprise and of Discovery are doing little tasks here and there, just keeping things busy while those other extended tasks are happening. So this is giving everybody a little something to do. Then we're flying the shuttles, we're flying the different things out there. That's just stuff happening. A lot of that would be narrative. Then there's this moment where, out of usual character hubris, they say, well, hey, Control, hey, Leland, by the way, you're outnumbered, so what are you going to do? And that's a perfect opportunity for the Game Masters to spend some threat, right? The Game Master says, oh, yeah, well, so, Control, Leland kicks back and says, well, count again, or look again, or whatever I think it was count again. And all of a sudden, all these little drone ships come popping off the off the control ships and start launching thousands and thousands of these little fighter drone thingies. And you see everybody's look on the Discovery, just their faces just kind of collapse. It's like, oh shit, we're in for it now. And that's exactly what my players would do. Like if they dropped that on me and said, oh hey, by the way, you're outnumbered, we're gonna get you. And then the bad guy says, well, no, actually here's some threat. Push a few chips of threat their way and say, yeah, I'm adding some adversaries, I'm adding some NPCs, I'm raising the stakes, more surprises to come, but here's a whole bunch more ships for you to deal with. And then all the players are collectively like, oh, okay, this is bigger than what we thought it, so here we go. And then the big fight happens, big fight. And then in this moment, this is as the episode progresses. Again, a lot of stuff packed into this episode. By this point, the challenge portion to complete building the suit is pretty much done. Like the suit is built, they've got it on the stretcher, they're hightailing it to a docking bay. Everybody's going with them, everyone's helping. Game Master spends some threat. Maybe there's a or maybe they just get into space combat. During the space combat extended task, the Discovery takes a hit, takes some damage. Game Master decides that there's some collateral damage to crew on the inside, and the player of Stamets gets the short end of the stick here. Stamets takes an injury, sufficient to knock him out of the fight, knock him out of the scene. Basically, he's not unconscious, but he's effectively out of action, right? So they grab him, hightail him to sickbay, where he gets to have an emotional scene with Culber, right? So that continues that thread line of their subplot. Kind of we get to pick that up a little bit later in the episode. But at this point, so everyone's heading for the shuttle bay with the suit, and unfortunately, Stamets can't join them. He's got to go back to sickbay. So that ends that, and then here we are, Spock and Burnham, last two people to make it to the shuttle bay. They've got all the parts, the suit's ready to go. Burnham finishes the gated challenge. There's probably not even a task involved. Just the last little step of that gated challenge is to take that charged up time crystal, boop, knocks it right into the back of the suit. Suit's ready to go, and she's like, okay, now it's time. They get to have a role-playing scene. This is an emotional moment for both Spock and Burnham. This is potentially their goodbye. Of course, they drag it out a little bit because Spock says, "Well, I gotta get in a shuttle, and then you're gonna follow me out the ship with the shuttle, and then I'll guide you to the next step of the way." And so there's a little emotional moment there. Nice little character beat is what you might call it for these two characters. Burnham gets into the suit. There she is over here on the left center. And then, Pike's command was to all the ships that are out there, form a cocoon around Burnham, do everything you can to protect her, to get her to the next stage of the story. This, in and of itself, is potentially a new extended task, right? Or maybe even a gated challenge. No, well, how would I structure this? There's not really any breakthrough points. I'd probably call this an extended, like a linear challenge, maybe. Do you successfully, cocoon yourself around Burnham, and then do it in stages? Like, can Burnham get to stage 1 safely? Can she get to stage 2 safely, et cetera, et cetera? And maybe I would ad-lib some attrition rates in here, like as the ships take damage, as the ships get destroyed. Or I might just lean into the narrative and just go with what feels right, and go with what seems to work for the moment at the game table. But anyway, so Burnham's on her way. Things are happening, and then here's the crew of the Discovery and the crew of the Enterprise. All those player characters probably thinking to themselves, well, Burnham's got the suit built. She's on her way. Like, what else is there for us to do on the ships other than fight Control and hold Control off long enough for Burnham to finish the job, right? Well, so the Game Master says, well, here, I'll throw some threat on the table, ka-chunk, and here's this big honking photon torpedo that Control launches and crashes right into the Enterprise. It doesn't detonate, but it's stuck in the ship. Now what do? You got a ship with a big old threatening photon torpedo sticking out of it. Well, shoot, here we go. So the Admiral and Number 1 head on down to go check that out. And they get there and they say, oh, well, looks like the Game Master's put an extended task in front of us. Well, I guess we better start figuring this one out. So, they have to start dealing with that. Meanwhile, as the heat continues to intensify on the battle between Control and the Discovery and the Enterprise, Reinforcements arrive. The cavalry finally arrives. So in a dramatically appropriate moment, the either the game master just dictates that this happens, or maybe the players have a little bit of momentum on hand and they create an advantage. Reinforcements arrive or something like that, and finally, maybe Ash has made his efforts to make connections. He calls in his chips and brings Laurel and the Cleave ship into play. And then, kind of another potential advantage that was created was the Baul ships and Sarana, Saru's sister shows up as well to provide reinforcements. She is in the fighter and the Cleave ship, and they just lend their weight to the battle too. Again, this would probably be something I just narrate. I wouldn't spend a lot of time rolling dice because having thousands of NPC ships. I'm not going to spend that time rolling thousands of dice to see how it goes. I'm just going to narrate it and see what works best. Clearly, the Cleave ship and the Baul fighters showing up helps kind of shift the balance of power to some extent over to Discovery and Enterprise and keeps things moving. And then as we're working through those subtasks, there's also another one coming up here. I don't remember the exact timing, but where is it? So somewhere along the way in here, Leland beams onto the Discovery, right? In that brief window of time where the shields had to go down so that Burnham and Spock could get out of the shuttle bay. Leland beamed on, right? So that was a nice little clever moment for him. I would totally call that a Game Master threat spend. That might be a case where during the scene I'd spend some threat and I'd be like, okay, I'm spending some threat here. Didn't say why, right? So the players are like, wait a minute, why did the Game Master spend threat? What's waiting for us? And then this would be the moment where I drop it in. Somewhere in here, I don't remember the exact timing of between that and this, So the Enterprise crew thinking, oh, okay, our job is done. We just have to hold off control now until Burnham's done. But nope, Game Master threw in a surprise, dropped some threat, put a photon torpedo into the ship that they now have to deal with. And then on the Discovery side of things, Discovery crew and player characters probably thinking, oh, our job is done. We've built the suit. We've gotten Burnham out the door. Now we're just kind of like holding fast until she can complete her mission. But oh nope, guess what? I'm spending some threat. Guess what? Leland beamed onto your ship. He's going to go after the sphere data before you can jump to the future. So now Leland's on the ship, and now you've got to deal with Leland. So that's where Giorgio and Commander Nan are like, oh, we're going to go after Leland and have that whole extended task subplot kind of happening on the ship. Meanwhile, right? So then Burnham lands and gets ready to do her time jumpy thing, but it's not working. The characters collectively have not figured out the whole mystery, like what led the Red Angel to those 7 different spots. They still haven't finished that, and that in and of itself could be an extended task that has been spanning this entire season, right? They may have been stringing that along for the entire season. The Game Master may have had like a very large work track on that large progress track or whatever, and it's still not done, right? And it's not until this point here where Spock has his moment of intuition. He talks to Burnham, together they figure it out, that like that last piece that they needed to pull together. Maybe the Game Master has been stringing this extended task along for the entire freaking season, which shows you the flexibility of that tool. And finally, at this opportunity, at this moment, Spock gets to make the last roll to get the last few points, that last breakthrough, to finally get to the point to say, oh, wait a minute, here's how it all worked out. And then he talks to Burnham about it, and Burnham's like, oh snap, that's how it totally worked out. And then everything goes from there. They get to have another goodbye. Burnham's like, oh snap, how did you figure that out? How did I not figure that out? And then she programs her suit. And then boom, she's off. And this is really all narrative for her from this point. Like when she does the little task, probably just to program everything in to make sure there were no errors. I'd call that probably a low-level task at this point, because it would be cheap to penalize the player with a really hard task right now to put it all together after Spock has just figured out the solution to this season-long extended task, right? I wouldn't pile on to the characters any more than necessary here. So Burnham, plugs in the data that she needs to plug in order to make those 5 jumps that they know happened over the course of the season. And then like that whole bit of her jumping from point to point to point to point to point, is all narrative. I would just give that a long narrative flow of things that are happening to Burnham, and hopefully I'd make it interesting enough to keep it engaging so that Burnham could get through it, and all the other players could watch and listen and see it all come together as it does in the show. Meanwhile, as Burnham is doing all that amazing stuff, the Admiral and Number One have tried to complete this extended task, and this is probably one of the main places in the episode where they failed. Right, they have an extended task in front of them to defuse the torpedo, unhook the torpedo, otherwise stop this torpedo from blowing up, and they're not able to get it done. So Number One says, I can't help you. Pike says, okay, let's switch places. Pike decides to come down, and then Una goes back up to the bridge. Meanwhile, on the Discovery, here's a great opportunity for a role-playing scene, right? To take a little bit of a breather. We got the combat going on. We got Burnham doing her thing. We got Leland fighting on the ship. But still, we can take a pause for a moment in this game to give Culber and Stamets a great little role-playing scene. And it was so important for their two characters to come to this realization that Culber has, to say that you're my family. You are more important to me than anything else, and I want to be with you, and I'm going with you to the future, because there's not a future here without you, right? I mean, words to that effect. So this was a great opportunity to drop in a slow moment. Take all that action, slow it down, give your players that beat, give your players that key moment, that key emotional moment for their characters, which is continuing that thread that we've been weaving these last 2 seasons, right? Give them that moment, absolutely give everybody a moment to shine, give everybody a moment to do something meaningful, which doesn't always have to be dice rolling, right? It can be character moments like this. And so they have this great character moment, and then we're moving on, right? We get that slow moment, and then we're back up into the action. We're right back to Georgiou and Non fighting Leland, having this, rock'em sock'em fight all through the ship. They're getting engaged, they're getting fighting, and then one of the players said, hey, I just saw this awesome movie called Inception. I think we should totally turn this fight into an Inception fight. So they drop an advantage. They spend some momentum, or maybe give the GM some threat to create this advantage of maybe the gravity in this section of the ship is wonky, or maybe the ship is moving, and now we're fighting on the walls and we're fighting on the ceiling. When we're turning things around, and the game master's like, yes, and let's do it. And yes, and Leland throws you around onto the bulkhead, and yes, and Non gets in a shot, and Georgiou gets in a shot, and Leland punches away at you. You're just having this big fisticuffs fight. Of course, knowing that Georgiou is really doing all this to set Leland up, right? But just a great little opportunity here for the players to throw some momentum into the mix, throw some threat into the mix, and change the circumstances of the scene. So it's not just a straight up fight. There's actually some dynamic action happening here with the whole ship moving around them as they duke it out. So nice little use of momentum or threat there. Continuing the thread here, they're falling around, they're getting beat up, etc., etc. Georgiou takes a shot at Leland, gets a good hit in, but he uses his nanite technology, whatever's, to heal himself. And then Georgiou's like, okay, it looks like Non's out of action for the moment, so I'm going to go run to engineering. Leland, of course, comes after her, thinking that she's got the data and is gonna finish the job there, right? Meanwhile, Number One says, all right, well, so long, Admiral. Sorry I couldn't help you, but good luck. And then Pike shows up, and they have it out. Meanwhile, the fight with Leland and Georgiou continue. Georgiou plays rope-a-dope, basically, pretends that she's on the ropes, gives Leland a good kick into the room, whatever, and that's looking bad for Leland there. And then meanwhile, Pike and the Admiral try to finish off this extended task, but it failed. Like, nothing they do managed to work. And as a game master, I don't think I would have had this scripted to end the way it did. I think I would have put this challenge in there and said, okay, just see what happens. And as it works out, the dice were not in their favor. They ultimately fail this extended task, and as a result, we see the end of Admiral Cornwall, and Pike looking on. And I tell you, when I see this scene, man, I can't imagine how every single person in Starfleet doesn't have some level of PTSD. I mean, like, the counselors must be super busy constantly keeping track on everybody going through life in Starfleet, because like any given day, any given any given stellar phenomena or situation in space could result in the death of a crewmate or the death of a commanding officer or something. And how does, I would love to know how Starfleet teaches resiliency to their officers, because it's just amazing that like Pike is like so noble to stand there and watch her die, knowing that there's nothing he can do about it, right? I mean, that's just mind-boggling. But this is potentially a great character moment for Pike, right? He knew that he and his fellow officers could not do anything to prevent this. I mean, they failed that extended task. They could not do anything to stop it from blowing up. Admiral Cornwell makes the final sacrifice to prevent the rest of the ship from getting destroyed and from killing potentially the entire rest of the crew. So she sacrifices herself, that noble sacrifice. Pike's looking on. This is a moment that, as a game master, I would not have scripted. I would have just put that challenge in there. Okay, you have to defuse the photon torpedo. If you fail, ship blows up. Bad things happen. If you succeed, then hey, great, you've succeeded. And there might be some minor consequences if there was like a complication or something. But I don't think I would have gone into this episode planning to kill off Cornwall. I think that would have just happened in the course of the narrative. And as it turns out, it works out great because it's a great character moment. Pike has a meaningful moment afterwards, etc. Her loss is felt keenly, right? Because she's been such a great character for the last season and a half or so, and or 2 seasons, I guess. And there we are. So then we move on. The fight continues, and the Discovery shields are suffering. And this almost kind of felt like an afterthought to some extent to give Tilly something to do, which is unfortunate. But the drama was coming in. It's like, okay, the Discovery shields can't hold any longer. We're about to be destroyed. Can anybody do anything to regulate and get the power back? And Tilly, of course, is getting her moment. She's in the Jeffries tube or in the whatever conduit, wherever she happens to be, and she manages to fix it. This is a task that she needs to complete. I wouldn't call this an extended task. This would probably just be like a straight up difficulty, I don't know, 2 or 3, something like that, to get the shields back online. And of course, she's successful, which is great, and that gives the Discovery enough shield power and enough time back to survive to another day. Meanwhile, Georgiou is wrapping up with Leland. She's got him locked in the room, and she's turned on the magnetic the technobabble there, and so she's enjoying watching Leland die. Leland's super pissed off that he couldn't make it happen. He dies in a horrible mess, and then that is enough to get Burnham off on her way. Discovery goes with her. They're gone. They're out of action. I mean, they're out of the picture entirely, right? They're out of the series entirely. And we're left with the Enterprise and the Klingons and whatever other ships are still remaining left to mop up here. So that's pretty much wrapping up the whole storyline there. And then we've got the long denouement where everybody talks to Starfleet Command saying, oh, no, the Discovery blew up for sure. Yep, Discovery's gone. And oh, by the way, we should never ever talk about this again. So let's just kind of like sweep it under the rug. And, oh, hey, Ash, you're now promoted to the commander of Section 31. So, yeah, good luck. So a lot of denouement coming out of here. All the surviving characters have their moments. They all have some stuff to do. This is kind of wrapping up the season, wrapping up the series to some extent, right? Because this is the end for a lot of these things, except that if you're thinking about it from a player perspective, like maybe everyone's leaving to go off to their next thing. There's going to be a long break, except that the players of Spock and Una and Pike, they all know what's coming. They're like, oh, we got our own series to start playing here coming up pretty soon. And then meanwhile, you got, Burnham and everybody else. They're like, oh, we're off into the future. We don't know when we're going to play the game again, but when we do come back to play the game again, it's going to be completely different because we're going to be 930 years into the future. And the Game Master's probably thinking, shoot, I don't know what to do with that just yet. So how about we spend some time playing in the Prime universe at this timeline, and we'll just spin off from where we left off. We'll do something called Strange New Worlds. Pike, you're the captain. Una, you're the first officer. Spock, you're now chief science officer. I'm going to play with you 3 guys, or you 3 people, and maybe some of the other players are like, oh, I'll play a different character. I'll play the pilot. I'll play Ortegas, and I'll play and someone else says, I'll play an Andorian engineer named Hemmer, and so on and so forth. So maybe some of the players decide to play different characters in this game. and then some of the other players, move on to other things, but hope to come back in a bunch of months to continue the story of Burnham and Stamets and Saru and all those characters, which they'll do eventually when we get to season 3 of Discovery. So anyway, I've been going at this for about half an hour now. This feels like a good place to stop. Although I'll just add a few closing notes here. This episode, in a lot of ways, culminates all the plot threads that we started building in the first season into the second season. So this is a way for you to see how you can make that season finale like super action-packed, super lots of things to do with dice rolling and extended tasks and gated challenges and just things for players to do. Everybody gets their moment to shine. And it's also a balance, right? So not only are you doing lots of action-y stuff and lots of combat and lots of science discovery and things, but you're also pulling in all those character threads, right? All those different plot lines that we've been able to drop in. Now, a lot of them were mostly resolved in the last episode, in the first part of the two-parter. But in here, you see some of the big ones come to a close or come to a key resolution point. Spock and Burnham finally make their goodbye, and Burnham has a great little speech to Spock saying, there are people in your life who are going to reach out to you. Let them reach out to you. Don't be the loner. Be willing to let them reach out to you. That's a significant character moment for Spock. Burnham lets go, says goodbye to Spock. Culber has a great character moment where he realizes, I can't live without Stamets, so I am staying with you. So that is an important character moment where that player says, I'm not going to stay here in the present. I'm going to go with you to the future for good or ill. Whatever happens, we're in it, ride or die. We're in it together. And so that's an important character moment for him. I think those are probably the two characters that had the most significant little bits happening to them, other than maybe Pike, who realized that his end is not with the torpedo. His end is yet to come, and he's just got to accept that and let somebody else take the hit and make the noble sacrifice, because his noble sacrifice will come later. He just has to be patient and wait for it. And we'll see what happens there. But yeah, so this was a great episode from a role-playing perspective, because you gave everybody something to do. The dice rollers had dice to roll. The role players had role-playing to do. You bring all the stuff that you've built over the last 2 seasons to a culmination. And then you've got 2 launching points here, right? You're launching one new series in Strange New Worlds, and you got the promise of continuing the other series, Discovery, at some point in the future when all the players are available or you're able to get them all together and stuff. So this was, a great 2-parter, I thought. A lot of stuff going on. Really great plot bits. You even pulled in some subplot characters, right? Some secondary characters made their cameos here right at the very end. You got to see L'Rell again, and you got to see Sarana again. So it was just nice to pull on those little touch points and give Saru his moment to say, oh hey, Sarella, you learned how to pilot a fighter in 6 episodes or whatever it took. She didn't waste any time, that's for sure. And then of course we get to see L'Rell again, and even though L'Rell was emphatic that the Klingons and the Federation are not allies, she was there to help prevent the whole universe from coming apart, because it would not be in the Klingons' best interest for Control to get the sphere data, because then Control would wipe out the Federation, and then would wipe out the Klingons, and then would wipe out the Romulans, and yada yada yada, and then that's the end of things. So she was there more, I think, to protect the galaxy and not so much necessarily these people. But you can read into that what you want. Anyway, so I think that covers it. If this was useful to you, I hope you had fun listening to it. Any questions, drop them in the comments. If there's any episodes that you would like to see me kind of dissect and bring into a role-playing perspective, any Star Trek episodes, drop them in the comments below. I'd love to see them. I've watched everything Star Trek. I'm just about to start a rewatch of Voyager, so I'm going to be talking about Caretaker here pretty soon. So we can talk about starting a series as opposed to ending a season or ending a series like we did here. I'm going to watch Emissary again, because I think if I'm going to talk about Caretaker, I've got to talk about Emissary as a great start to a season and a great start to a series. So we'll talk about that. And of course, I've got some other stuff that I want to do as well. But anyway, so I hope you've enjoyed this. Like and subscribe if you so desire. Thanks for taking your time to watch this with me, and have a great rest of your day. Thank you.